Today on the show, Stanley Cup champion, public address announcer Andrew Imber is back to discuss the Summer of Champions full circle moment and what his next major milestone is as a public address announcer.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Thursday, October 3rd edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're to your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News. You can follow me on X at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on X and Instagram at @LO_FLA Panthers. And shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guarantee. And you could do that all at FanDuel.com. So Florida Panther fans, this is grateful to be back here on another edition of the show where we are one step closer to opening night when the Florida Panthers take on the Boston Bruins from Amerant Bank Arena. And still have one preseason game to go for the Panthers. Still, the next round of cuts is still to be determined on who will be eventually making the opening night roster, which we will discuss more on tomorrow's edition of the show. But today on the show, we have a special guest here for us here on the podcast, where he is a multiple-time guest, and now we could call him a Stanley Cup champion. Stanley Cup champion, PA announcer Andrew Imber is back here on the show. Imber, welcome back to the show, my friend.
Armando, thanks for having me, man. It's great to be back.
Absolutely grateful to have you back, my friend. And now 10 years at the helm for you. And when you made that announcement, it was also cool to see the logo that you created with the Roman numeral X with the microphone there. Tell us just not only how great is it to be back and now being in double digits too, and also how much does it mean to you coming back now as the Florida Panthers are now Stanley Cup champions?
Absolutely. I mean, I have goosebumps just like thinking about it because it's crazy. You know, sometimes I kind of look at it like there's no real flukes at the pro level, but sometimes mistakes are made, and sometimes an announcer will come in and it just doesn't work out. It'll be one bad year, one, average year, maybe two. But once you get past really the second year, there's really no mistakes at the pro level. You've proven yourself. When you get to 10, you're starting to talk about just kind of rarefied air. Like if you go around the league right now, there's maybe 5-10 announcers that have that kind of tenure. And that means a lot to me. It means that I'm doing my job. It means that this isn't just that kid with a dream anymore. It means that I'm a true professional, and that the hard work that I put into every part of this, the listening back to my own tape to make sure that I was doing things the right way, fixing any sort of mistakes. Even last year, I was like, I said to my boss, can you send me the audio of the entire game? I want to listen back to everything that I say from the start to the finish. And I picked up on maybe one or two things. They weren't mistakes. They were just things that I felt like I could do better. And so I kind of look at it as if I'm an athlete. Like I go back to the well each summer. I try to perfect another part of my game. And I think that's why I've been able to have the great fortune that I have of somehow, I can't believe it, a decade into this. It's absolutely amazing. And as you said, now it's the championship season, getting to celebrate that. It's something we've all wanted for our entire lives. I mean, it's always been a dream come true, but I feel like this year especially, it really feels like the dream come true has just kind of come full circle. And now let's just keep doing it, right?
Yeah, and for fans listening to the show and people who just attend the games whether they go to 41 games a season, they are gonna connect with you as long as you're doing this too. When they come to a Panthers game, they're gonna identify that voice, the sound, the vibration, how long you hold each name too. So that is going to be, it's symbolic to a franchise and just the overall game day experience, especially you being a fan of this team and growing up and everything for yourself. But also I want to get to the personal side of things for you. I remember when we last saw each other in person, it was game 4 of the Stanley Cup final for that watch party. I remember talking to you and DJ Genesis, and I remember as I was saying bye, I was saying, we're going to celebrate tonight. And I jinxed it that night with saying it before puck drop. But I also want to get a sense of what your heart rate was then when you see 8 goals given up by the Panthers, and then finally getting to game 7 of the final. Years past, I remember you would post something saying, I wish there were a game tonight when the Panthers would be eliminated and there was still possibly one more home game. But you were probably thinking, no more home games. I want the Panthers to win. But obviously, you still got your chance to announce a Stanley Cup championship for the Panthers clinching at home. So I want to give you the floor on that.
Yeah, it's funny, right? Because like if you're in a vacuum and you're just like you're going to get to announce your team do it in game 7, I'd be like, that's perfect. Well, sign me up. Where do I sign this contract? But obviously, they don't tell you how you get there.
Mm-hmm.
And when the journey goes 3-0 to 3-3 to the win, obviously it does get a little prickly. I mean, look, I think that game 4 was just not to be expected, but we had won 3 straight. Edmonton had all the desperation in the world at home. I mean, that there was no surprise that Edmonton came out hard on that one. And look, game 5 could have gone either way. People don't talk about how close that game was sometimes. Like that one bounce, and we have that one too. So we had gotten some bounces, and then they got some bounces. And game 6, same story at times. So, I mean, it really was 2 really good teams. Let's face it, you don't get to the Stanley Cup by accident. There's some playoffs where maybe some flukes happen in wild card rounds, maybe in baseball and stuff like that. But in hockey, the 2 best teams generally find their way all the way through. And Edmonton and Florida were the 2 best teams last year. And we had to win a battle, and we did. And like you said, yeah, I mean, game 7, obviously, I've never been so nervous in my life. Not for me. Like even being on that stage and knowing that, you know, millions of people were going to hear me on television, I wasn't nervous for that. I was just like, please give me this championship. And to get to actually do it, to be the one to say your Florida Panthers are Stanley Cup champions, to be the one to introduce Gary Bettman with the Conn Smythe, to be the one to introduce, ladies and gentlemen, the Stanley Cup. It still doesn't feel like it actually happened. It almost felt like a fever dream, and obviously the best one ever. But I think it'll maybe even start to set in even more as we get to this ring ceremony, as we get to this, the home opener and watch the banner go up. I think there's going to be some emotions, I think, from all of us in those moments, because that's just going to be almost like the proof that it was like, this wasn't a dream. This actually happened. And, look, at the end of the day, I think it happened in the best way to get to 3-0, to dominate the early part of that series, and then to go through the adversity. I think we all knew, even as a franchise, this was never going to come easy. And one of my favorite quotes of all time is the Count of Monte Cristo's, only those who have experienced ultimate despair can truly appreciate ultimate joy and satisfaction. And that's what it was. We went through everything as a franchise, and we came out on top in the most dramatic way possible. A 1-goal game in game 7, pinning the puck to the sideboards, to the corner boards. I mean, I don't think I'll ever get over it. I know how lucky I am to be to play the small part that I got in that, and it was just an absolute dream come true, and it happened in the best way.
Yeah, and then just thinking, at least from my experience watching on TV game 7 and just hearing 3 seconds to go from Sean McDonough, but also I want to congratulate you on getting that praise from Sean McDonough on what he said. I believe it was game 2 that he said, at game 1 of the final, that he said that, of how talented you were as a public address announcer. But also, before we recorded here, I went to go back. I went back and saw that clip and just wanted to hear what you were saying, what you said when the final buzzer went off. Usually for a game where, for the beginning, we hear you say hello, Panther fans, and everything. But usually final buzzer, it's Panthers win, the final score. But listening to it again, I hear Panthers win before you even say final score. Stanley Cup champions. Obviously, when you go in a position like that, you go with what your feelings are at the time, and just you were just ready to just let that out. And I'm just like, man, I could just see how much that meant to you when you were just yelling that over the mic.
And it was all chaos. I mean, there are a couple of behind the scenes clips. There aren't many, but there are a couple of us celebrating up there, and it's a miracle we got anything off. Honestly, like we were jumping up and down and screaming and yelling, and we were just as much of fans as the fans in the seats. That's what I always say is I'm just a fan, and I had to like grab the microphone. I'm standing up. I'm trying to get the microphone over to me as I'm up in the air because it was so hard to sit back down at the seat and all that, and during the celebration. So I mean, honestly, it's a miracle we got off the celebration in as professional manner as we did, because we were just absolutely on top of the world. It was just the greatest moment.
And beyond happy for you that you got to experience that for the 561 native of you getting that chance to call that for the Florida Panthers in Game 7, like you said, the best way possible. But we are going to transition to segment number 2, where we are going to discuss more about the parade, the photo op, the full circle of your first season here to everything. We are going to discuss that more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And hey, NFL fans, you can start this season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out all the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you can place your bets. You can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Once again, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And you can do that all at FanDuel.com. And I'd like to thank you guys once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Thursday, here with Stanley Cup champion PA announcer Andrew Imber here on the show, and also one of the most fit people out there too. So we Imber, we got to start a weightlifting club between you, me, and Doug Plagans if sometime in the future. But question. You would consider yourself a metalhead, right?
In the ballpark. I'm definitely like a fan of pop punk rock, Sum 41, Green Day type stuff. I was in a rock band in high school, and I still play bass guitar to this day. And we did have touches of like that Avenged Sevenfold heavier side. Yeah. Not the true like death metal, but yeah, I definitely like some heavier rock for sure.
Question: what's the one song that you love? What's the one background music song that you like the most when it comes to announcing games at the arena?
Wow. I mean, there's so many songs that are like kind of go-tos and stuff like that. There's honestly a song that A Day to Remember somewhat recently came out with called Miracle.
Oh, love that one.
It's just so good. And the lyrics behind it, like we don't need a miracle. Like we're just kind of this talented kind of thing. So this was always to be expected. I'm not waiting any longer kind of thing is kind of the message of the song. I've been waiting for so long. And I don't need a miracle. This is just, it's just going to happen kind of thing. And it's such a good vibe and stuff. That's the thing that comes to my mind right now in terms of like something that would get me kind of pumped up.
Ocala natives, A Day to Remember. And I remember you talking about you playing at a venue that they played at one time. I remember we spoke about that.
Yep.
In your past. But for me, the one song that gets me pumped up when you announce it is when Stanley C. Panther comes to the ice, and then Cody and Cambria's Welcome Home plays. Yep. But it really fits the vibe, and I really embraced using that song on my Instagram, on the Locked On Panthers Instagram, every time there was a home game during the postseason. I really truly embraced that for the Panthers and just the game day experience for that. But you came here 10 years ago, and was your time coming in just as the Broward County Commission vote 5-3 happened? Was that before or after?
I don't recall if that was in the year, yeah.
Okay, so with just that and just the relocation rumors that were going on, and then just having, when it comes to franchise moving, we've seen it with Arizona to Utah and even the A's with Sacramento. When you took that job, now looking back at it, with now that the Panthers are now having that extension, looking back at that, seeing was your mindset looking at it at the time saying, this could be temporary, but still let me still try to work on something in case something doesn't work out? What was your mindset then and now looking back at it when it came to probably the uncertainty of of what was going on at the time?
I mean, putting it in this context, it makes me think that it was probably just before my time, because there was never a thought that this was temporary. I don't remember ever being uncomfortable. So I think that was probably before I got there. And yeah, I mean, I remember having to defend myself to even like friends who were big basketball people and telling me to go follow a more traditional sport kind of thing. And I'd be like, no, like hockey's what I love. And I remember saying stuff like, if you want to take my team, you're going to have to come through me kind of thing. Like, I felt defensive about this team, and I always have, and I always will. I bleed Panthers red. And so no, it was never one of those things where it felt like that. And my heart goes out to some of these TDAs, the Coyotes. Oh my God. I can't think of anything worse to be a diehard fan of a team and have them taken from you. There's so many things we could talk about in that, and that's probably for another day. But no, it's one of those things. Like I said, it hurts to even put myself in those shoes, because like you said, the rumors were out there, and we're so fortunate. The ownership group, the head of the franchise, the front office, all the important people are just such great, amazing, dedicated people. And we owe them so much, because we're in look where we are now. We're the envy of the league. We're the envy of so many teams in sports because of what an amazing job our owners and the front office have done. And it's just, we're so lucky, because as you said, you can see what happens in other places sometimes, and no one wants to be in those shoes.
And from that to celebrating the Stanley Cup Championship in the rain, there was also questions on whether they had to reschedule it due to it, but it ended up happening. All the players partying, you getting your chance to lift the cup on the stage too. The Conquered the Hunt shirts that Fanatics put out on that day too for everyone, and and your photo op too with the cup in your professional look there too. Also, we've seen the Stanley Cup in All-Star Weekend too. But did you touch the cup before the Panthers won it? I still have not touched the cup, by the way. But had you seen the cup before All-Star, or even before the Stanley Cup Championship? And what has been your experience with the cup?
Yeah, I went to the Hall of Fame once. I was there at All-Star Weekend. I've probably come across it 3 or 4 times previously. There are little events when they bring it. There was like a truck that was going around one year to NHL venues. Yeah, so I've been around it maybe almost a handful of times, and no, never touched it. I am, as Michael Scott said, a little stitious. I was not going to bring that bad juju. So no, I had never touched it. I wanted to wait for my turn. And you better believe I was excited to get my hands on it. The parade was amazing. It was unexpected. It happened out of nowhere. I was kind of poked to go in that direction, go get it. Steve Goldstein was one of the ones who helped me kind of go in that direction. And I'm definitely grateful for his advising in that moment, because, yeah, I mean, that was so much different than a photo op, even though the photo ops have been amazing too. And once again, the organization has done such an amazing job of getting the full-timers, the part-timers, getting everybody in there. Everybody who's been a part of the organization, they've been making sure to include everybody and to put on these events for us so that we get a chance to get a photo, great photos with the cup. But that moment on the stage, because you can't lift it during a photo op. So to actually get that moment where it felt like almost a player in a way, like just to be in the right place at the right time and get that, that's still maybe my favorite moment of all this, honestly.
Yeah, and for the event of just how, I mean, because we've seen Fort Lauderdale Beach host so many different events like concerts, like we mentioned All-Star Weekend, but then just having to, and then just to think that once again, I never thought that I would see Broward County make an announcement for pedestrian traffic the day after the Stanley Cup. Wait, we're closed for pedestrian traffic for this celebration? That's just how you know how much winning cures, and when you when you bring that good juju to an area too for a franchise, and just building that up for them. I mean, for just full circle moment for the Florida Panthers here, as they accomplish their goal. And also, I challenge you guys listening to read Emily Kaplan's work on what she did on ESPN.com on the Panthers that was just released this morning. We're going to discuss that later on in the show. But we are going to transition to segment number 3, where we are going to discuss more about Andrew's experience of announcing and everything that he gone through prior to this, and what is his next major milestone. We're going to discuss that more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Segment number 3 here on this Thursday, October 3rd edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Thursday. So, Andrew, I want to discuss more about just the journey of you coming here. We mentioned the 10 years of being with the Panthers. I mean, you also have various different interests outside of hockey. We spoke about spring training baseball last year, FAU sports. I mean, you started with their hockey team there prior to being with the Panthers. But also, as an FIU alum, I'm really happy to see you also get some games at FIU question, by the way, how is that being an FAU alum but also announcing some FIU games?
It's really funny when they play each other. I'll tell you that. It's something that I never thought that I would do. You know, it's been fortunate how much I've been able to kind of grow as an announcer and get all these new opportunities and stuff. And honestly, FIU has been really good to me. They're one of those schools. Look, every school is different, and some of them you can just tell prioritize. Even if we have to, come up with a little bit more money for our game presentation, our game production and stuff like that, we're going to do it in order to make it sound professional. Not every school is like that. Even in D1 sports, I've come across schools that it's not their priority. FIU has been really good. I started with some of their softball last year. I'm now the main FIU volleyball for women's indoor. I imagine I'm actually going there tonight for soccer as a fill-in. So it's been so much fun to do so many different colleges now. Some on the high school level, of course, professionally is always amazing, and having that opportunity with the Panthers and with the spring training for the Astros and Nationals has been really exciting too. Again, it's been quite the journey. I'm so glad that I can actually do what I love and share my gift, because I mean, I feel like I'm okay at a few things, but I know that announcing is my one true gift, PA announcing especially. And I'm so lucky that I get to share it with the world so often.
Yeah, and it's crazy because those FIU soccer fields have been used for practices for professional teams for prior to games of when they were playing at places like Hard Rock Stadium. So it's crazy to think that you've been in the same place as some of these world-class athletes too, even if you haven't been there necessarily at the same time for yourself. But also just how you got here. You spoke about just challenges from yourself, and also your experience of announcing with your friends and Mario Kart too, for how you got here. So tell us more about that story, or just about maybe some self-doubt, or maybe other people who have maybe doubted you, and also just how you've shut down all that noise.
For sure. I haven't done it every single year, but I've done it a lot of years, where I kind of recap all the doubters from the very beginning. Because I mean, for those who are just kind of getting acquainted with me, maybe this is the first time you've heard my story or anything like that. Like, I did grow up in speech therapy. And so it's near and dear to my heart for sure. And look, it's not like I can say at 7 years old, I knew I was going to be the public address announcer for my favorite team, kind of thing, but I always knew that I wanted to work in sports. And from a young age, I think I knew that I wanted it to be hockey related. And so it was an obstacle to overcome. I spent a couple of years in speech therapy, going after school, taking my favorite snack and a book, and learning how to talk right. And it was just kind of like a reminder that if I could start in speech therapy and look at me now, that I wanted to at least kind of get out there and tell people that even if you have a limiting factor that's in direct opposition to exactly what you want to do, you can't let that stop you. Because if there's one thing I've learned in this world, it's that life is pretty short, and you can't get caught up working a job you hate for your entire life. You have to go after the things that you want, because at the end of the day, all we're going to regret is missed opportunities, right? And so for those of us who have been there, we want to limit those missed opportunities. So if there's something that you want and you just feel like, I'm not sure I can get there, I have X, Y, and Z that's kind of holding me back, break those chains off, man. Do whatever it takes to kind of just go for it. And even if you're really bad at it, look, you want to go back to some of my first games, not only at college, but even at the professional level. I didn't sound anything like I do now. The elite players, the elite talents, and what you want to do come with experience. It comes with doing it for a long time. And so you're going to be really bad at it at the beginning, most likely. If you're not, then you're ahead of where I was. So it's one of those things where you have to kind of get comfortable being a little uncomfortable, and knowing that at the end of the day, the journey is going to be worth it, because we got to do what we want to do in this world. Because like I said, it's our one shot, and life is way more meaningful when you're kind of chasing down those things that you really love and the things that you're super passionate about.
Yeah, and you're speaking to a lot of people. Also, you're speaking to me too, as someone who has a speech impediment, if it isn't obvious already to the listener. But for your motivational videos, just on what you do for Instagram. I mean, just think about it, and looking at it is just when you really go down to the roots. You think about the story behind everything, behind that person, on why and their purpose of doing it, and also just the approach for someone to, I talk about in hockey, yes sir, no sir, being that type of person, and also putting your ego at the door, and having those role models of people who say, hey, maybe this is how you could structure things a little better, bullet points here and there, take a little bit of a pause, a drink of water, yada yada yada, for each individual, for yourself, and just say the only thing you don't want to live in the land of what ifs, and you yourself are not living your life in what ifs. You went after something with this gig with the Florida Panthers, obviously something that nobody should want to let go if they're in your position, neither for yourself, and just for everyone. I just hope that this speaks for them. And I said, where you are the voice of a lot of people's game day experiences. You are also paving the way for someone, even if it's not necessarily in this market, but also someone who possibly can do something at the high school level, the other professional sports teams too. And that speaks a lot of volumes to what you're trying to do. And because not only are you a PA announcer, you like to really dig deep into behavioral habits too, with what you talk about, especially on your Instagram. I know it catches my attention, at least.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I've always invited. I've always said that, during my journey, I ran into all types. I ran into super helpful people, and I ran into super unhelpful people. And I often found that the people who were the most helpful were the ones who were the best at what they did. It was the day I got to sit in with Doc Emmerich for an intermission and talk to him. And Doc just shared all his tools of the crafts, his papers, he took the entire intermission with me. And that meant everything to me. And I knew that if a guy like Doc Emmerich could do something like that, he's not afraid, this young kid's going to take my job someday. Like, no, he's like, I'm the best. I'm great at what I do, and I'm going to help everything that I can with this guy. And it was the ones who were afraid, I think, that, I'm not sure I want to share every little bit of what I know with this up and coming kind of kid, that were the most insecure, honestly, about where they were. And a lot of them aren't in the business anymore, honestly. It's part of why I've always invited every single young kid, like, yes, reach out to me whenever you need anything. I will give you advice. I will listen to your tapes. I will tell you what I did in your shoes and what I recommend to keep growing in the field. And I've been a mentor to a few people, a few young announcers over the years, and I've watched them grow and get more opportunities. And that means everything, because I'm extremely confident in what I do. And if I can help pave a different path with another team, like you said, for someone else and help them get to their dreams, like that's a great part of the industry.
It's also about the mindset of not seeing those people as competition. For example, any Panthers podcast out there, I don't see them as competition. I actually want to help Panther fans listen. I want Panther fans to listen to every Panthers podcast out there, because that just helps the growth of the team and the franchise and the sport and everything. So it's just really about how you view yourself, first of all, internally, and then how you spread that out in order to just be so welcoming to everyone around, so that everyone can just continue to grow together. Because like you said, I mean, PA announcing, it's a fraternity. I know you're chatting with a lot of people not only in the local market, but around the NHL. I mean, I remember you spoke about during All-Star, I believe it was the Vancouver Canucks PA guy who you collaborated with for All-Star weekend. It's just, I can only just imagine just the amount of info you took from him too, and just about different styles, and then just putting it as your own.
Absolutely. I mean, and the PA Brotherhood is what we have a little group with probably about 2/3 of the NHL PA announcers. And I've met more than a handful of them. Jeff K from Dallas came and visited one time with his family. Wade from Carolina came during the All-Star game. Like you said, I worked directly with Al Murdoch from Vancouver during the All-Star game. Over the years, I've taken really important advice from Wes Johnson in Washington, from Ryan Mill in Pittsburgh. These are some of the guys who I reached out to in my infancy when I had any self-doubt, and the stuff that they told me went a long way towards me gaining more confidence and getting to the point where I am now, where I'm just so confident in what I do and become such a more well-rounded, complete announcer. And a part of it was because I got some great advice from people who have been there before. And like you said, that's right. There are people who are higher than me. There are people who are lower than me. And I like to learn from some. I like to teach others. And that's all part of the journey, right?
No doubt. And very happy for you that you have learned so much and grown so much throughout this. But one last question before we get out of here. You fulfilled the dream of having the Panthers win the Stanley Cup and you being in the building for it. What's the next major milestone for you, my friend?
Well, I think there's obvious stuff and there's non-obvious stuff. I think that the most obvious milestone that is kind of on my radar would be if I can have the great fortune of sticking around another couple of years, I would be coming up on 500 NHL games. So that's something that would mean a lot to me, because obviously there's a lot of round numbers, and 500 is probably about as round as it gets until 1,000. So that's a pretty big day. Like I said, I just crossed over 400 in the playoffs last year. So it's going to take about either 2 full seasons of really, really long seasons, or it could take into a third more. But yeah, so in terms of numbers and stuff like that, 500 would be such an amazing milestone to reach, and it would put me in such kind of rarefied air that it would be an amazing day for me personally. Look, there's some people who believe that you shouldn't talk too much about your big goals, but I do have big goals. Rest assured that they do not include leaving. I want to be the Florida Panthers PA announcer for the rest of my life. I would love to be there for so long that they have to think about retiring my jersey someday, because it's like, oh, he's been here 50 years. We probably need to do something, right? Like, so that would obviously be the goal. But in addition to that, I would like to work some of the biggest events in the world. And I think that I've started to kind of make my way towards that. And I think that the sky is the limit. And I think that I would like to someday be synonymous with all the big events in the world. And that, you know, I just hope that I can bring a little bit of extra pride to the Panthers organization to say, hey, like, our long-term announcer is also looked upon as somebody who has been selected for some of the most major sporting events in the world. And I think that would just make it such an amazing full ride.
And hey, hopefully maybe up in the rafters with the with the last name Imber, and instead of a jersey, instead of a sweater number, a microphone. So how about that?
Absolutely love it.
But Imber, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Tell everybody where they can follow you online, my friend.
I am still just at Imber Voice, IMBER Voice on Twitter, Instagram, and even on Twitch occasionally. We'll roll some marbles or we'll play some Jackbox. So we have a little fun out there too.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Imber, for joining once again, and hope to see you at the ring ceremony. So cannot wait for that.
I can't wait to see you, man. Thanks so much for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Absolutely. And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Stu Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez with Andrew Imber, and you've been listening to the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.